Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. It's the 23rd of October and we have as our regular Monday guest, Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank, coming to us out of Singapore. Vishnu, as always, great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Brian. Always a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me on the show.
Now, Vishnu, before we get your insights, let's take a look and see how markets across the region have performed. But for a start, let's take a look how crypto markets have performed. We start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has breached the 30,000 mark. It's at 30,673. It's up 2.39%. Ethereum is at 1,694. It's up 3.72%. Now, looking across to regional equity markets, we start first with the Straits Times Index. That's down 0.29%. Then we've got Bursa Malaysia, which is up marginally at 0.05%. Shanghai is down 0.82%. The ASX All Ordinaries is down 0.87%. The Nikkei is down 0.59%. The Hang Seng is down 0.66%. And rounding up the numbers, we got the Kospi, which is down 0.72%. Vishnu, largely a sea of red today. Tell us why.
It does look like markets are somewhat worried. I mean, we do still have the Gaza situation going on. And I think a key point there is, and it remains unresolved, is whether or not all the global intervention is able to put ring fence around that and say, let's contain this, or the spillover risks to Lebanon or proxy Iran war remains a huge threat, in which case I think the tragedy of the conflict, all the knock-on impact on commodity in particular energy markets could be fairly jarring. And I think that's the back of the mind risks that markets are positioning, or at least ready to position for, even if the current pricing do not reflect all of that. So oil prices have calmed a little. Dollar is also off the top from last week. Gold, however, remains elevated, suggesting that the background geopolitical risks remain high on the mind of many. What is also happening coincidentally and rather unusually is, despite geopolitical risks being high, gold being high, US Treasury yields are also high. And I think that really derives from something unique this time. Markets say until and unless they start panicking about geopolitics, they are not going to take their eyes off US fiscal and debt problems either. So you've got but what that means for EM Asia, where typically geopolitical risks have lowered USD yields, for the EM world, now we need to be worried both about high oil prices and high interest rates, and as well as a dollar that remains strong, which is why a lot of the regional currencies are also feeling a lot of heat and a bit of a setback against this backdrop.
And so then, given all this uncertainty, what's top of mind for central bankers today right now?
Well, I think we can take some kind of reference from Bank Indonesia last week. So Bank Indonesia unexpectedly, and walking back earlier assertions that they are done with tightening, hiked policy rates by 25 basis points, and they didn't leave any ambiguity around it. They quite openly said that this was in the interest of rupiah stability. So clearly, currency stability is becoming a concern for central bankers to a point where policy rates might be lifted to address that situation. This, I think, does two things. One is it opens up the possibility that other central banks may follow suit for two reasons. One is that's partly the playbook that's been now brought to attention, and you've got the dollar strength that's eroding all currencies. The other is I think insofar that Bank Indonesia does it, the relative rate difference within the region also grows as Indonesia's rate hikes begin to mount. And I think other regional central banks will have to sit up and take notice of that. So the central bank versus currency play becomes a huge theme for the rest of Asia.
And this is particularly true with Malaysia. with the spread being almost about 2% with the Fed rate and the Bank Negara rate.
I mean, that's absolutely true. The consensus is still for Bank Negara to hold steady. Bank Negara is tried and tested, very steady pair of hands, and so there ought to be a lot of trust in it. However, I think we are under very, very unusual circumstances. And what is quite telling is, despite oil prices going up, which is typically, the playbook for ringgit to relatively outperform other regional currencies, being the only net oil exporter, hence gaining, whereas other Asian currencies tend to lose when oil goes up. Despite this, ringgit has not only failed to leverage on oil, but also relatively underperformed, not outperformed. And this is also on the back of the fiscal announcements last week, some of the subsidy rationalization that on paper at least is supposed to be good for the ringgit insofar that it spells medium to longer term fiscal traction and an improvement in the fiscal situation. So I think all of these also reflect underlying risks around politics, political stability, and whether or not such an extractive measure, extractive in the sense of it's really going to extract a lot from the current government's political capital, can go forward without some kind of headwinds coming across. And in the very near term, some of the subsidy reduction can actually lift inflation, which brings us to your point, which is not only the nominal rate difference, but the real rate difference between US and Malaysia becomes even more stark, applying more pressure on the ringgit. So in the very near term, the hope is most of the sell-off in the ringgit is done. The fear and the caution around this ought to be that there may be more downside risks left in the ringgit as well as some other Asian currencies. So the next few months could be somewhat tumultuous.
On that sobering note, thank you very much for your insights, Vishnu, and thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me to make the Monday gloomier.
We've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy from Mizuho Bank, coming to us from Singapore on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out this interview on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.